Just before we begin, we would also like to make a few thank yous. First, to begin with, we'd like to thank the IPPF, Bickle and Brewer Foundation, New York University, and the Council on Foreign Relations for giving us this amazing opportunity, as well as a platform to debate here today. But furthermore, we would like to thank our amazing mentors and coaches, most importantly, Ms. Potts that's here with us, and Mr. White, who is supporting us back in Texas. We'd also like to thank the rest of our teammates that accompanied us on this trip. We wouldn't have made it to this platform without them. But more importantly, we would like to thank the rest of our team back in Plano supporting us, as well as our friends and family. And I would also like to congratulate all 8 teams that came to New York, and big congratulations to Eastridge as well to making it to the finals. And with that said, at the leisure of the judges and the moderator. As director of the Institute for Food and Development Policy, Eric Jimenez once said, "Hunger is caused by poverty and inequality, not scarcity. The world already produces enough food to feed 10 billion people, the population peak we expect by 2050. Thus, Plano Senior negates. Resolved, genetically modified organisms are essential to global food security." To clarify today's round, the Oxford Dictionary defines essential as absolutely necessary. The burden on the affirmative team is to prove that GMOs are absolutely integral to global food security. If GMOs are not the only solution, or in other words, if alternatives can do the same thing or better, then GMOs are not essential. Furthermore, GMOs should be evaluated in the current political and cultural as well as economic context. To affirm, GMOs must be able to achieve food security in the real world, not just a vacuum, but in actuality. Food security requires food production to be both sustainable as well as accessible, neither of which can be achieved with GMOs. Our first contention is sustainability. In considering food security, we must look to not only the immediate future, but also the long term. Unfortunately, GMOs are nothing more than a short-sighted solution for 4 key reasons. First, monocultures. According to the Canadian Biotech Action Network in 2015, almost 20 years on the market, more than 99% of the GMOs planted in the world are still limited to 4 crops: soy, corn, canola, and cotton. Thus, Denzia Getzberg from the Food Safety Politics concludes that GMOs reinforce genetic homogeneity and promote large-scale monocultures, undermining biodiversity and increasing the vulnerability of crops to climate change, pests, as well as diseases. Second is superpests. Pest-resistant GM seeds are often sold to farmers under the pretense that they will promote efficient pesticide use. However, we have found the complete opposite. The open source project found that GM farmers applied 318 million more pounds of pesticide over the first 13 years of commercial GM use. This is because the pest-resistant GMOs cause pests like the rootworm to evolve and become stronger. Third is superweeds. Since the introduction of Roundup Ready crops in 1996, Nature magazine reports that 24 species of herbicide-resistant weeds have developed. After 2 to 3 years of growing GMOs, farmers needed to increase herbicide use by 25% each year to see the same benefits. This fuels a vicious cycle that augments the scope and is destructive to the capability of these weeds. Unfortunately, the USDA explains that superweeds reduce yields, force farmers to use more expenses on weed management methods, therefore decreasing their overall net profit, and finally destroying local ecosystems. Fourth is soil degradation. According to the World Economic Forum, the current rate of soil degradation means that only 60 years worth of topsoil remains. This is projected to cause a 30% loss in food production over the coming decades, and a key cause of this is GMOs. As Dr. Mercola from the University of Illinois explains, GMOs seriously disrupt soil ecology by reducing microbial diversity, which decreases soil fertility over time, possibly irreversibly. Dr. Mei Wo has confirmed that vector DNA placed in GMOs to allow the initial insertion of foreign genes also enables unintended gene transfer, including to soil organisms. As of 2004, scientists have already discovered at least 87 species of susceptible bacteria. Furthermore, research from the New York University shows that certain aspects of GMOs are not readily broken down in the soil. When these remains are absorbed by these soil microbes, they change and disrupt the ecological balance. Even worse, they can easily spread via wind and groundwater. Altogether, these critical flaws undermine food security in the long term. GMOs are unnecessary, and especially when sustainable agricultural techniques like agroecology and erosion control perform even better. Jay Priddy from the University of Essex studied sustainable conventional initiatives on 12 million farms and found that yields increased by 79% and pesticide use actually declined by 71%. Our second contention is accessibility. This can be seen at the country and individual levels. First, GMOs undermine local access to food on a countrywide scale, especially for developing nations. David Kaplan explains that when nations adopt GMOs, these changes of nature farming for these local farmers are then moved to more industrialized farms that are taking over these areas. In fact, it is displacing millions of farmers. In Argentina, we saw this occur when 60,000 farms went out of business, while the area of Roundup-ready soybean almost tripled. Local food access is not only worsened by inadequate distribution, which results in food waste. As the UN quantifies, a third of total food production is lost or squandered before it reaches the market. That's 1.3 billion 2 tons of food. Just saving 1/4 of this could actually end global hunger. According to the FAO, to achieve this, industrialized countries must raise awareness among food industries as well as consumers, and developing countries must invest in infrastructure, transportation, and packaging. Targeting directly to the feeding programs, food for work programs, and income transfer programs have all been implemented around the world. For example, MIT reports that a food for work program, or the FFW in India, saw agricultural output and household incomes increase between 39% and 70%, paying rural workers with food improved local infrastructure, employment, and diets, breaking their cycle of poverty. But second, GMOs increase poverty among small farmers. As the International Food Policy Research Institute explains, poverty is the root cause of hunger. Under the pressure of global agribusinesses, they face a simple choice of either giving up their land to very large-scale industrial farms or adopting GMOs themselves. However, small farmers reap none of the benefits as they are exploited by large corporations, and this occurs specifically in 4 ways. First, high startup costs. The Cambridge University writes in 2007 that small farmers incur substantial debt in order to purchase the expensive GM seeds and chemical inputs. Second is terminator seeds. Author John Robbins in 2011 writes that GM corporations patent their seeds and insert a gene into these seeds to prevent them from reproducing. These seeds cannot be replanted the next year and force farmers to rebuy the seeds every year, no matter what, trapping them into a cycle of poverty, even when the prices of Monsanto's GM seeds are jumping up 1,000%. Farmers were forced to return to the corporation, and their debts grew as Monsanto's profits rose. Third, monopolies. Robbins continues that GM companies buy out competing seed companies to capture the food market. In fact, from 1996 to 2008, Monsanto acquired more than 50 seed companies, and now the lack of competition and innovation has reduced farmers' choices and enabled Monsanto and other large companies to raise prices unencumbered. And fourth and finally, counterfeits. Farmers seeking cheaper alternatives to certified biotech materials have created global shifts to counterfeits. Traxler from the Urbane University explains that about 95% of GM soy planted in Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay are not legally certified. And Gartaduri reports that about 15% of pesticides and herbicides worldwide are actually counterfeit. Such counterfeits endanger the lives and health of millions of farmers and consumers, as they are often not diluted to the proper levels. Critically, the FAO writes that around half of the world's 795 million hungry people are from smallholder farming communities, and thus we as Plano Senior stand in negation.